Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy. This is episode 326. Sorry, 327. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at Stacy Patton 89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this Tuesday afternoon?
Doing pretty well. Still recovering from a weekend in Vegas, but other than that, can't complain.
I guess not everything that happens in Vegas stays there.
Oh, well, actually, yeah, because I got Christian McCaffrey at 4th in my draft, and I'm pretty proud of that. So,
Do you guys always do your draft in Vegas?
It was the first time. It was actually it was cool. We got like a cabana and like the board and everything. It was pretty fun.
Were there a lot of people doing it?
There were a couple other groups who like mentioned it. It was funny because like when I told people, they were like, "Oh, are you going for a bachelor party?" And I was like, "No, I'm going for a fantasy football draft." And they just looked at me like, "Huh?" So
Yeah.
but
Well,
it was fun. I would recommend it for. I've never been for March Madness. I think that would be even more fun. But definitely fun times.
Yeah, I'm sure that you guys were well behaved during your.
Oh, I got your boy too. I got Josh Allen. So
nice. Would you pick him like top of the second round or something?
I got him in the third actually. Because I went. It was a 12-team draft. I got McCaffrey, then Garrett Wilson, and then on the snake I got Josh Allen. So early third round.
Good to hear. Good to hear that we'll be having similar rooting interests this year. I did not go to Vegas last weekend, but I am still recovering from what I did last weekend, so that was great. But
what happens in Shwin World does stay in Shwin World.
Yes, but we're not here to discuss whatever debauchery me and you got up to over the weekend. We are here to talk about basketball. But before we do that, I have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strick.land on Instagram. Posting all kinds of new content in there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you've not done so already, please hit like and then subscribe to the channel. That would be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which is available on our website. You can go to that at www.thestrick.land. There's a link there to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of stuff there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, even water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland mailbag, hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, a.k.a. the Doug Bag, alongside Dallas Miko. That comes out every other week. You also get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. It certainly has not stopped during FIBA. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod, where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits like listening to our pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline, which is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and match reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games to be able to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And speaking of games that are starting, did you happen to watch any of the USA or Canada games over the last few days, Stacy?
Watched a little bit of the RJ Canada game today, but haven't watched as much beyond the highlights. So encouraging again to see RJ doing well. I think he's Frank Barrett mentioned this on Twitter. It seemed like there was a stretch in the third quarter when he went away, but he still flashed some more of the cutting stuff. And Frank, Jeff, we can refer to them interchangeably. A point he made is like it's tough sometimes to apportion blame for, the stretches where RJ does seem to disappear. The fact that his role isn't what a lot of his proponents want, or his people who are really on the RJ as a star bandwagon. A lot of the arguments are his role often keeps him out of the flow of the offense. and the blame kind of can go both ways, right? Should the Knicks do more to prioritize not just him, but more off ball stuff so that you have more actions on one play and who the offense quote unquote runs through doesn't matter as much. That's to some extent a team thing, and to some extent it's an RJ thing because there's always ways to stay involved. But it was just interesting. Like I think Benji clipped, this cut he had into the lane, which set him up for a post up. His shootings looked a lot better. And I think, at this point, I'm more focused on that because I know what Jalen Brunson is. Jalen Brunson's a star. I know what Josh Hart has been giving the States. For people who still question his value, provided he's used in. I think last time we talked about the fact that him and Barrett had like a +1 net rating in the regular season. In the playoffs, it was awful. And like if you look at every other lineup, it's a Freudian slip there. Josh Harbaugh. If you look at every other lineup that Josh Hart is in, he if Harbaugh was a player, he probably would be like Josh Hart. But it's a positive, right? Every other two-man grouping. So the point is, like, you're seeing that impact play out. But I think RJ's is where it's like tentatively, like the jump shot is looking better. In Canada, he's, in the Canadian system, he's still got some bad habits. He can be a little disengaged in times. And I don't think that's an effort thing or anything. It's just sometimes it's difficult to know. Should I space? Should I cut? Especially when you're playing, he's still playing next to a ball dominant player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But it's been encouraging. I've really liked all the Knicks that are played, and shout out another one who we haven't talked about much, Rokas Jokubaitis, who had a pretty good game today for Lithuania.
Like I've said, I'm not trying to take too much away from any of these games for any of them. I think they're obviously more important for RJ than they are for Brunson, or certainly for Josh Hart, who is going to just do Josh Hart stuff. So it's been good to see him, hit threes and be kind of like, he's basically been their second option. The first game obviously was not so great, but then he's had a nice couple games since then. You would like him to make some free throws at some point. That would be nice. But 3-point shooting has been good. I think when I've seen him, I feel like in general, it feels like he's making smarter decisions. I don't have the numbers. I'm not really that interested in like trying to compile those numbers, but he looks like he's making better decisions on drives. He seems a little bit more under control. I think he actually is now starting to move better than he was for long parts of last season. And it's just good to see, obviously, him get these game reps in now. And honestly, it might be a good thing just in the sense of he's historically been a pretty slow starter every year of his career. Feels like the first month is always really hard on him, and then he usually picks it up around December. So maybe getting these game reps in now, we can avoid that. And it has him coming into camp probably pretty much in optimal game shape at that point. And that can only be a good thing for him and hopefully for the Knicks, because this is a key season for him. I think it's a key season. It's a key every season to some degree is a key season for the Knicks, but for him very specifically, in a lot of ways, I feel like he is the key to the Knicks season. Like I don't even feel like that's very controversial. We don't need to always repeat this, but I did think he was basically the worst player in the rotation last year, and I suspect that if you gave him truth serum and you asked him if he was satisfied with his season, his performance over last season, I don't think he would have been. I'm sure he knows that and is aware that.
And by the way, I don't think that's anything that anyone has ever questioned, right? I don't think anyone's ever questioned his commitment. And even today, after he had a really good performance, he was 4 for 6 from 3. He missed 4 free throws in the second half, and that was the first thing he talked about. So that is something, the work ethic, the kind of polish, the fact that he was basically raised, both by his father and by Steve Nash, and groomed to be this kind of like, that is one of the things I think the Knicks really liked about him at 3, even if they were interested in a guy like Garland or something. So I don't think that's ever been a question. But yeah, you know that he probably wasn't satisfied with what happened last year either.
Yeah, and I think that's you know that's kind of why it's such a key season for him, and why I think he is the key to the next season because the Knicks, there's a perception of what they have done this summer and whatever, and what their current talent is and what it's capable of, and I think a lot of that is tied to people are I'm not saying forget Knicks fans, but I think the outside view of this team and specifically of RJ Barrett is like he is a very inconsistent player and his lack of shooting is a problem and all this type of stuff. And if those things are not problems this year, then it changes, I think, not just the ceiling for the team, but the floor of the team. I think it has the potential to carry them to a level that I don't know if anybody really thinks that they could be like a 60-win team. But really, if you kind of look at the numbers, you would think like, yeah, if RJ just kind of like, I mean, if he can just be a solid 3-point shooter,
I
even
mean,
with
last year's counting stats with league average true shooting and like better defense is just massive for the Knicks, right?
yeah, and I mean, look, they were basically on like a 56 or 57 win pace after the Josh Hart trade, and then even that's kind of like probably sells it short in the sense of the last couple of games of the season they basically punted, right? The New Orleans game and the Pacers game where
Brunson missed quite a bit of time during that stretch, by the way, as well. So
yeah, so I think the Knicks were pretty
and so did
content.
Randall, right? Randall missed
Yeah,
the last few weeks of the season. So
Randall missed the last 5 games. So I think like this team is gonna go. I don't want to say they're gonna go as far as RJ Barrett will take them, but I do think he is very important in terms of raising the ceiling of what this team can be, could be, has the potential to be, whatever you want to phrase it.
yeah, I mean, he's an inflection point. I'll put it like that because if you also look at from a roster standpoint, the things we've often, I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, but that rangy 6'9" wing, a Trey Murphy type, right? You know, the Knicks have not been able to. They tried that with Cam and it didn't work out, but that's clearly the kind of player that is on a lot of rosters that the Knicks don't have, or I should say, a lot of winning rosters. I'm not saying those guys grew on trees, and that's part of the difficulty here. But so he is the closest thing the Knicks have to that, right? A functional guy with plus length, athleticism, versatility, switchability, whatever. And then the other big weakness that's a little bit related is I wouldn't call it a weakness, but they don't have a true rotation level backup for. They have Hart. I'm confident in that, but there's going to be matchups. There's going to be matchups where it's like, if he guard like Hart, I think is a good enough rebounder and a good enough defender to survive there. But if they're playing, the Sixers or something, and Tobias Harris is in the game, he's giving him 5 inches there, right? That's where a guy like RJ. What?
Yeah. I said pause.
Wow. I know. I heard what you said, but my recording didn't pause. I think that that's where and those matchups give you that flexibility because if RJ is really functional there, then there's 2 things, right? If they do have to play against a 4 who's a little bit more dynamic, you probably like Hart a little bit better off ball. So if RJ can play on that guy, that's better. And also there might be some, and I do think that what worries me when I think about some of the rotations is I'd love to stagger Randall, but if we play Milwaukee and Milwaukee doesn't stagger Giannis, you can't put Hart in on Giannis. You can't put RJ on Giannis either. Those are some of the tougher things. But that aside, right, most teams that's not going to be the issue. So at backup 4, as being able to play as the 4 with the second unit or when Randall's out, as well as giving them kind of a long rangy wing, that's another inflection point. And yeah, as much as the Knicks shooting gets derided, Randall, if you weigh the attempts and the percentages together, he's that's. I don't think Randall is the reason their spacing isn't great. Well, at least from a shooting perspective. To the extent he might be, it's probably from occupying space at the wrong time, but that's a separate issue. But in terms of shooting, he's a good shooter. Grimes always obviously a really good shooter. Brunson is obviously a really good shooter. RJ being able to just be league average is going to open up so much more for those guys, especially Brunson, I think. So I don't think it's a hot take at all to say he's kind of the inflection point. The one thing I really want to see, which it's tough to take it away from a FIBA game. He's got to get better on the glass, especially defensive glass. He has the capability to be pretty effective as a small ball four, but he's got to. There were multiple big instances, especially in that. I want to say game 4, where he had breakdowns on the defensive glass. You know, there was a clip I think Benji showed today, and like it was about that 30. We should talk about that 30-70 ball quote, by the way, about Josh Hart. But Barrett's watching the rim, and Josh Hart is just scoots right by him and grabs it over a bigger player. And this was when Josh Hart was on the Pelicans. But I think that illuminates what everyone who says RJ is the greatest player ever, and we traded 17 draft picks for Josh Hart, and Josh Hart is a waste of money. Like these are the things they don't get. But that is kind of more of what you'd want to see from RJ. We talked about RJ a lot, though. I do want to bring this quote up. Did you hear the Steve Kerr quote about, or I think it was technically a Spoelstra quote. This was like
it was Kerr quoting Spoelstra about Josh Hart. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, one, I think there was a lot of good things. One criticism of Hart has been that like he's not a good enough shooter to be a shooting guard, but like he kind of just plays whatever. And Steve Kerr says, I don't care what position he plays winner, which is a very Steve Kerr platitude, but I'll accept it because it's in my guy's favor. And then the other thing he said was, I was talking to Eric Spoelstra. Spoelstra said, there's a lot of guys who get 50-50 balls. And by the way, this is especially from this coach. We played that team, and Jimmy Butler is the epitome of that kind of guy who's going to get to those kind of plays. And all of these guys, especially some of the ones that are undrafted, they have that junkyard dog mentality. So for Spoelstra to say this is pretty impactful. But he said, pretty important. He said a lot of guys get 50-50 balls. This guy get 30-70 balls. So even when he's at a disadvantage or a severe disadvantage, it doesn't matter. And I still think that doesn't capture all of his impact, but yeah, I thought that was a really cool quote, and I think it was leave it to one of the smartest coaches in the NBA to succinctly give a pretty good description of Hart.
Yeah, I think I don't know, the rebounding thing with RJ has been, even at FIBA, it's been the one thing I'm just like, I don't know, it's really weird. It's like he doesn't sense the 50-50 balls at all. Like there's one today where he just like, he wanted to go out and leak out in transition, but the ball is like loose. And I think Powell ended up having to knock it out because he couldn't get to it. So like whatever, Latvia retained possession. But it's just one of those where you're looking at it and you're like, what? Like the play there is to get the ball. You get the ball, and then like that's more important. Securing possession is more important than leaking out in transition. Especially like look, man, I don't know. Even if Dwight Powell gets the ball, I'm not sure he's going to be throwing some sick outlet past you.
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on the situation, right? It's that mental math, which I actually think Obi Toppin is really good at this. I think people kind of were like, well, he's a cherry pick or whatever. I don't think his defensive rebounding was ever like the problem with him, but he was really smart about when to leak out. And I'm not saying I'm not even questioning RJ's field, but that is a skill in itself. Like those kind of when do I, and it's even beyond that. When do I need to box out? When should I like claim some space and just go for the rebound, right? I think that, like, because boxing out isn't the be all end all either. So I think those kind of elements, to your point, can be tricky, or they seem to be a little bit tricky for RJ at this point.
Yeah. And look, even like Obi obviously had his bad moments with that too. So it's part of kind of figuring that shit out. But like, I don't know. I mean, he rebounded worse last year than I think he had previously, right? Is that? Could be wrong. I can look it up. I didn't look at
the numbers, but I think anecdotally, and again, it's the kind of thing where it's like it's a little annoying if he plays the 3, but it's not some death knell. But like if we are going to rely on those small ball lineups with him and Hart at the 3 and 4, or even Grimes at the 3, probably more so if it's Grimes, then that's where that's where you'd really like to see him not just get rid of some of those issues, but actually be like a really impactful rebounder, which I think he has the physical ability to do.
Yeah, so last year was his worst defensive rebounding year. It was also his worst offensive rebounding year, but I mean, he's not a guy who's going to be like a monster offensive rebounder anyway, so I don't really care about that at all. But like honestly, I will say this: I do think Prez has talked about this before that his steal and block percentage were also at career lows, and they've actually ticked down every single year, both categories. The defensive rebound percentage was a career low last year. I don't remember what the exact splits are, but I think he had something like 39 dunks the first half of the year, and then he had like 7 the back half of the season. So I just wonder if like I don't know. I don't want to like throw out an excuse for him, but I do wonder when you just see, there was a stretch in December where he was like catching posters at the rim. He's like just yamming on dudes. Then he comes back from that finger injury and he has that monster dunk on Scotty Barnes, and you're like, okay, he's still good to go. And then I don't know what happened, but like the rest of the year, he just looked, for so much of it anyway, he just looked slow. He didn't look, he's never been the most explosive guy, but even in transition, it felt like he couldn't get up like we've seen him get up before. And I just have to wonder if like he was carrying some kind of injury, because it just seems so weird that you would all of a sudden, just look so much less athletic in the middle of a season, especially given like the injury he had wasn't some lower body injury, right? It was a fucking his pinky or whatever it was. It was like his finger basically like came off broke through the skin. His bone was showing, but like it wasn't anything that should affect his athleticism. But then like, and it's not just the dunks, right? But it's also, like I mentioned, the decrease in defensive rebounding, the decreases in steals and blocks, and it's like, I don't know how. There's no way to know, obviously. Oh, he had less dunks last year than he's had ever in his career. He only finished 29 dunks, which is the lowest percentage that he's ever in terms of makeup of his overall field goals. It's the lowest, dunk share, I guess if you want to call it that he's ever had in his career. So like, it is something to keep an eye on, and I do think the defensive rebounding, they're not obviously the same exact things, but I do wonder if some of that stuff, the defensive rebounding and those things are, whatever was going on with him last year. Because I mean, the other alternative that we don't really want to consider, I don't want to consider, I'm sure you don't want to consider this, is like, is RJ some weird 22-year-old, 23-year-old, I guess now, who's like already in physical decline? And I mean, that doesn't really make any sense to me. So I'm just kind of assuming that he was carrying some type of injury that we were not told about, that we didn't hear about. And that, look, again, the defensive rebounding hasn't been great in FIBA, but I wouldn't say it's been atrocious or anything like that. And I do think he's moving better. And one thing I actually noticed today that I think is worth considering, look, he has to be better defensively, but I do think how little we switch is a problem for him, in the sense of like, he's not great at getting over screens. So when you force him to have to fight over it because that's your coverage, you're gonna give up stuff because of that. And it's not his fault that we don't switch more. They don't switch more because they don't have that flexibility to the same level with Brunson, right? Like Brunson cannot switch across multiple positions in the way that Grimes can, or RJ can, or hell, even Randall can. And with Canada, he obviously, like, look, they're playing, I think they're 1 to 3. The starting lineup is SGA, RJ, and Brooks. And so you have a lot more capacity to switch. And I do think that helps make his life easier defensively. And I do think he's actually been pretty solid. I don't want to say great, but like, he's been pretty solid defensively for Canada from what I've seen.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just kind of, I don't know if it's focus or what, but just attention to detail, repetition, getting that down. In fairness, this defensive scheme isn't easy on wings, right? You're often asked to overhelp and over close out, and you have to play a lot of judgment between a step here to this way to drive. Personnel. It's not easy by any means. If you're not getting on touches on offense, it can make it worse. And rebounding. I think that and rebounding is just its own thing where it can be a struggle, kind of just that is that whole calibration and reps and understanding where's the ball going, what kind of position am I in, should I box out, should I crash, should I, is the ball going to be a long rebound? Those are just things that hopefully he'll be able to work on and get better at. But if again, like even if none of that, like you said, if he's just a league average 3-point shooter, that does so much for this team. Like if teams have to close out on him, it makes Brunson's life a lot easier. It makes Randall's life easier. It makes RJ more viable and versatile off the bench. He even flashed a couple of pull-up threes, and if that becomes a thing, I do think that would be the kind of development that I wouldn't be ashamed to not have bet on. If you want to say I told you so, fine, but that's not something I would have bet on RJ because like volume, and he's not at volume yet, but he's hitting one or two of these, or he's taking one or two of these a game, and he looks pretty clean doing that. I mean, if that's something he can add, pinch if he does have to orchestrate, that's not a bad skill to have, and it could, portend that eventually he will be able to do more than just orchestrating a pinch.
Yeah. The other kind of thing I noticed and they whipped out today at the end was he pulled out a pull-up three that he took at the very end of the game. Is he going to shoot it at a high enough percentage that it matters? No, I don't know. Sorry, I should say. But I maintain that I think it's incredibly important for him to have some respectability at that shot because his shot creation is just too limited at times to kind of bullying his way into the paint. And to his credit, he can do it because he's just strong as hell. But like, you want to have different options as a player to go to. And more importantly, like his bread and butter is getting downhill. It would be a lot easier to get downhill if teams have to respect your shooting off the dribble to some degree. And again, like that takes time. It takes making a bunch for teams to start really respecting it, but it has to start somewhere. And so like, look, we saw him a couple years ago start pulling on these more, and it felt like he was maybe starting to find a rhythm or range out there, and it just has not happened. Last year was obviously, I think, it was his worst pull-up shooting year. He just stopped taking them actually at a certain point. But to me, that's like within the course of a season, especially one early in his career, it's okay to just be like, well, this isn't working. I'm cutting this out. Fine. But for him to get to where we kind of hope and want him and maybe even need him to get to, that shot has to be part of the repertoire that he's at least comfortable taking when teams are baiting him into it.
Yeah, and I think there's been times where people like run the offense through RJ, and he gets that chance with the bench. And usually they're smart teams. Their first initial sets are usually get him the ball in, from one of the sides, coming around a screen, a curl, some pistol action, or kind of give him a jab step, but on the side where he kind of has an angle to the hoop. Where I feel like he's struggled a lot more is when he has to create from the middle of the floor. This usually also only happens at the end of the shot clock, so in fairness to him, it's not the most advantageous situation. But he often has to settle for a pull-up because the defender's waiting back there. Operating from the middle, you don't have the same angle, especially if the defender is going to take away that part of the floor and you have to go around. It's going to be tough. So he often has to settle for pull-ups, and that hasn't gone as well. So just being able to do that, and be able to say that you can't just concede the pull-up to me, that opens up the middle of the floor as an initiator for him, which is a pretty big
deal. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, FIBA's cool. Yahoo dropped a list today, which I think is funny. They dropped a list of the top executives in the NBA, or ordered a list of the top executives in the NBA. And this list was based on a variety of criteria, including whatever. It's supposed to be some type of like sabermetrics attempt to try to grade front offices. But this is what the list I came up with. So top 10 executives in the NBA. Number 1, Danny Ainge. Number 2, Masai Ujiri. This is on Yahoo Sports, by the way. Number 2, Masai Ujiri. Number 3, Brian Wright. Number 4, James Jones. Number 5, Kevin Pritchard. Number 6, Pat Riley. Number 7, Troy Weaver. Number 8, Kobe Altman. Number 9, Brad Stevens. Number 10, Zach Kleiman. I got to say, I appreciate the attempt at creating some type of objective measure of ranking front office executives and front offices in general. I could not get through the entire article, and I also just thought a lot of this stuff was graded poorly because they're trying to make an objective ranking of something that is obviously very subjective. And their subjectivity was, let's just say, suspect to say the least. For example, the Bulls, ran by Arturas Karnisovas. They gave him they did this thing where it was like they graded draft picks, free agents, and trades as, home run, triple, double, single, strikeout, walk, something like that, right? Those are the various grades you can get. They gave Arturas Karnisovas a double for picking Ayo Dosunmu 38th in 2021 and a single for picking Patrick Williams 4th overall in 2020. Leon Rose got a single for taking Emmanuel Quickley and Quentin Grimes 25th in back-to-back drafts. They got a walk, a base on balls for Rokas Jokubaitis, and they got a strikeout for Obi Toppin and Miles McBride. I bring this up to say, one, I don't really understand how Deuce could be graded as a fucking strikeout right now. Like, I can see it as a base on balls, but strikeout is extreme.
They got a guy who locked down Donovan Mitchell for 5 minutes in the playoffs. I know that understates it actually, but no, one, the whole premise is, look, it's a creative article, right? They're having some fun.
I genuinely mean this. I do appreciate like the attempt at it. I thought the execution was fucking awful.
And the premise, like the difference between, first of all, like these are subjective terms, right? But
right.
I don't know that the difference between a home run and one base, which is what slugging percentage captures, right? Even in baseball, it probably is a little bit of an oversimplification because a home run is a guaranteed run. A triple, there's dependencies. But the difference between drafting LeBron and drafting like Brandon Ingram isn't one base, so you need more degrees here. I also don't know why a lateral or inconclusive, that's actually the funniest part of this. Lateral or inconclusive moves are a walk. No, the whole point of a big part of Moneyball and sabermetrics is that walks are good. They are not lateral moves. They're not inconclusive moves. You literally got a free base runner.
Yeah, you're one step closer to scoring a run.
Yeah, so the walk should a trade where it didn't pan out, but it didn't cost you much. That to me is a trade that was legitimately positive without costing you much should be a walk. I don't get how Quickley and Grimes are not front end rotation players, but Ayo is. Patrick Williams has missed most of the season.
And Patrick Williams is the 4th overall pick. You cannot call that.
That's another point.
That's
You're
not
not
a single.
Controlling for that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's not a single. I'm sorry. That's a bad pick right now. I'm not saying, and I like Patrick Williams. I still think he's got a shot to get to a better place and more kind of closer to what people were perceiving his upside as. But in and of this moment, there's no way you can just be like, oh, well, he plays minutes, so therefore single. No, he was the 4th overall pick. And look, if we're going to be real, the Knicks probably got more value out of Obi than the Bulls have from Patrick Williams so far. And you're giving them a strikeout for that, mostly because I think it's well, they traded him, which, okay, fine, fair enough. But if they didn't trade him, does that automatically like that would have magically made the pick better or something? Like I don't really understand that. And and the other part of it is like let's put the cards on the table. Like where would Patrick Williams go in a redraft? Forget forget redraft because there are so few people that are like, well, he's a big wing and okay, well, how rank their careers to date so far? Rank the careers to date so far in that draft, and he's not in the top 10. He's not even sniffing it, to be honest. Like it's just not there. So you can't give those things the same grade as like,
I mean, has
oh,
he been
the
better than
Knicks.
Quickly?
No,
Quickly
he
is rated
hasn't.
as a single, right?
Right.
He hasn't been
Quigley's
better
a
than him.
single and Grimes is a single. And I'm like, one guy's a starter. One guy was the runner up for 6 men of the year. Should have won it as far as I'm concerned. Like, what are we talking about here? And these are picks, these are 25th picks. So those are picks, right? Generally speaking, if you just get a rotation guy there, you're happy. And the Knicks got 2 starting caliber players there who've contributed in Quickly's case 2 times in 3 years to 2 playoff or 2 playoff berths in 3 years. And in Grimes' case, 1 and 2. And like they've been part of kind of turning around the perpetual state of disarray that was the New York Knicks at one point. I'm not saying they're the biggest part of it, obviously. Jalen Brunson was, who, by the way, Jalen Brunson triple, not a home run. Apparently that signing. But like, it's a weird one to me. And yeah, like, look, if you're not going to call the fucking Brunson signing a home run, I don't really know where we're talking about. Like, that's as big of a home run as you won't find a bigger home run signing in unrestricted free agency outside of like consensus superstar star switches teams or something, right? Like, yeah, okay, signing Kevin Durant, which didn't work out by the way, but signing LeBron James is bigger deal than signing Jalen Brunson, right? Fine, I'll give you that one. But like, you're comparing a guy that was and has been forever seen as like no doubt about it, no brainer. Just hand him a max and that's it. There's no negotiation, right? There's nothing that you're doing. You're not taking a risk. It's fucking LeBron James. Like Jalen Brunson was not viewed as that. The Knicks offered him a bag, which apparently, I mean, at the time, let's forget what he is now. Like at the time, people were saying that was a crazy overpay for like, really? That's a lot of money for Jalen Brunson. Like, so they took a risk there. And it's paid off quite handsomely for them. So like to me, and I don't know, to me, you just have to call that a home run because given the history the Knicks have had at the position, uh, like I think that has to weigh into it. So I don't know. I just thought this exercise was really weird. And we need to talk about this top 10 because this top 10 is a fucking disaster. Like, I don't even understand. Also, I wanted to point this out. So Leon Rose is 22nd. They only ranked 25 because they left 5 guys out that like didn't
They
have
also
enough.
called Nerlens Noel a strikeout as a free agent. Like, if you want to say
So I
in
think
2021 he was, but they said it for 2020. Like, he was a valuable starting center on a. I mean, yeah, he started most of the season on a team that was a 4 seed. So
yeah. I just want to say they only ranked 25 GMs because I think 5 were the sample was too small. Like they only started last year or something or the year before that. But I thought this was really funny too. So Leon Rose is 22nd, and then they have Jeff Weltman, who is the GM of the Orlando Magic at 21. And they counted Jonathan Isaac as a single for them. And like, I'm sorry, no. Like he isn't. Does he play basketball anymore? Like, I mean, I haven't seen. I have not seen that man play basketball in
if
God
he
knows
wasn't
how
willing
long.
to sacrifice for his beliefs, he would get the same shoe endorsements as LeBron. Oh wait, no, that's not him. That's Enos Penis.
Yes, but Jonathan Isaac single. These are singles, by the way. Okay, Wes Iwundu, 33rd pick, 2018 single. Chuma Okiki, 16th pick, 2019 single. Like these guys is Iwundu even
Even
on a
if anything, like if you wanted to give Cole Anthony a double, I would give you that honestly. But
yeah.
but if we're doing apples to apples, do we think Wes Iwundu and Chuma Okiki are as valuable as Quick Grimes and Emmanuel Quickly?
I like love Chuma as just a weird prospect guy that like I'm like I still think he's
Sure, but
damn in the
hasn't
right.
actualized.
Right. That yeah, exactly. You cannot call that a single. That's a strikeout. They've gotten zero value from that pick. Wes Iwundu
Or
is
if
even
that's a single, then Quickly and Grimes are definitely
yeah.
doubles. Right?
Well, is Wes Iwundu even in the NBA? I'm pretty sure he's not in the NBA anymore. Like that cannot be a single. And I agree. Like if you want to give
Is an
Cole
American
Anthony,
basketball player for the Stockton Kings of the NBA G League. So, but apparently as valuable as Grimes and Quickly.
yeah, it's just that makes no sense to me. I don't really get that. And I agree with you. Like if you want to say Cole Anthony is a double or whatever, that's fine. It just like I'll put it this way. If you wanted to tell me Cole Anthony should be viewed in the same level as Quickly and Grimes, I disagree with that. But I can like understand that rationale. I
Yeah,
could
it's not crazy or anything.
I could understand it, right? But you can't put those guys then in the same bracket as like Jonathan fucking Isaac, who doesn't play basketball anymore, Wes Iwundu, who's desperately trying to make it back into the NBA, and Chumo Kiki, who has quite literally done absolutely nothing in his career. Um, I don't know. This exercise was just very, very weird, and I mean, and I guess
I mean, they had. And it's weird. Also, like they have Caleb Houston as a strikeout. He was reasonably useful, and yeah, leave it to
it's
me to
and
like.
also it seems very early to like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
he's
yeah,
done.
maybe that's our bias sticking up. But I didn't actually like him at Michigan because he wasn't very good and the team underachieved. But
And
like
he doesn't rebound. He's soft.
but I mean yeah. But like he shot 34% from three, played 51 games. Like the weaknesses are with he's not a good finisher. He can't do much inside the arc, but he gives you that shooting. If it like how is he a strikeout, but a guy who's already out of the league in less than 4 years? He's a single, right? And it's
Frank's
just,
a single. You heard it here first.
and I don't know. Like, I think this is all, yeah. So like, and the thing is like, that's why what's dumb is that, they're trying to apply sabermetrics, but the way they're evaluating players is basically this, right? Like the methodology to kind of do the overall evaluation is maybe using that analogy, but there isn't a lot of whole analytical rigor in how they're saying this, right? So I don't know. I mean, look, you got Pat Riley at sixth, and he assembled the big three. Like, I think you're probably a little bit flawed if he's behind. If Pat Riley's behind Kevin Pritchard or even James Jones, like, or like
what is
Brian
Jones?
Wright? Brian Wright is the successor to R.C. Buford. He's the third best. He has no home runs. So okay, honestly, that's probably the biggest flaw. If you can have no home runs or triples, and he has one double. His only double is Devin Vassell. So you have no home runs and triples, like that, and that kind of like I get it. You and I are both proponents of kind of hit singles. We use this analogy a lot, but like don't kind of sacrifice your leverage and all that. And I get that. Maybe that's speaks to his ability to avoid strikeouts. He only has two. But he still has 3 strikeouts. One of it's a trade of Derek White. The other 2 were Primo, which obviously that was kind of a weird situation.
I mean, why is Blake Wesley not a strikeout when Caleb Houston was a strikeout? Like, what is the rationale for that? What the fuck
because
did Blake Wesley
because
do
whoever wrote this likes that person.
Right.
I mean, and Ainge at number 1, like Ainge O'Reilly just doesn't make sense. Like Pat Riley has won however many rings. Was it 4 rings he's won as the GM?
3.
Well, he won 2 with the big 3 and 1 with Wade. That you're right. Yeah.
We don't need to give Miami more.
No, but
more hardware than they have.
Like with R.C. Buford gone, I don't know how there's an argument for anyone else. Like that, and let alone being 6th. Like if he's 6th, then your methodology is really flawed. That based on the big 3 alone, let alone like all the success they've had with all these undrafted players and the continuity in it, and things like pulling Jimmy Butler in for way less than you should have had to pay. Like,
yeah, I have a tough time being like, okay. For example, like I don't really. Okay, so he's calling like these trades, right? He's calling the Rudy Gobert trade a home run. He's calling, and I get that. Like, I understand it. Can we wait? And I just feel like it is giving too much credit for tearing a team down. I don't know. Ainge at 1 to me is just ridiculous. Like the guy was not.
He also
never,
the author makes the point early in the article that not all home runs are created equal. So here's a good example. Pat Riley got a home run for drafting Dwayne Wade. Ainge got a home run for trading Rudy Gobert. That's the biggest flaw in this. Like those should not be weighted equally. To your point, right? Like he got Dwayne Wade and he became Dwayne Wade. We still have no idea what the picks and everything is going to turn into from the Gobert trade. You can't really weigh them equally.
Yeah, and I just I think the other part too with Ainge is like, I mean, I understand he's not totally capturing, or he's trying to like remove emotion from it, but like he was not a good GM for like the last 2 or 3 years he was in Boston. He was not. Like they do the Kyrie trade. The Kyrie trade blew up in his face, and they got nothing for Kyrie. Kyrie ended up walking, right, leaving in free agency. I don't. I think that's a flat out strikeout. Like not a major one, right? It's not like the game's over, no, but it was a strikeout. And I think he calls that a single. And I just don't understand that because their best season with Kyrie on the roster came when Kyrie was not playing basketball. Like he was hurt and they made the conference finals, right? They lose to LeBron and the Cavs in 7 games. The next year they flame out in the second round in pretty embarrassing fashion. And then Kyrie bounces, leaves town. I don't really understand how that's not a strikeout. And then you have like the fact
the cost wasn't that bad, right? But they gave the 8th pick.
They gave the 8th pick. They gave up Crowder, who was like a good role player for them. I mean, I'm not saying it's. I agree. That's why I said I don't. The game's not over. It's not like they struck out and well, that's it. Season's up. No, but it is a strikeout. Like you can still strike out in the first inning. Doesn't mean that like it still counts. Like it still counts as a strikeout. And then like he does the Kemba thing, and Kemba is like he's absolutely washed by like the end of by midway through his second season there, and to me like I don't know, you're calling that, what did he call that one? He has that, okay, he does have that as a strikeout, but like it's just there's a lot of these in the last few years. There's like Cantor, Strus. Let Strus go for basically nothing, right? Strus leaves and becomes a solid rotation player for the Heat, who have beaten the Celtics 2 times in the Eastern Conference Finals in the last 4 years. I don't know. To me, this is just a strange.
And I mean, I think you're painting with too broad. I think we were painting too broad a brush on both the strikeouts and the home runs, right? There are strikeouts that are like the Eddie Curry trade, and then there are strikeouts like the Knicks signing Fournier
Kemba.
Yeah. And then there are like there are home runs like drafting Dwayne Wade. And then there are home runs like is Rajon Rondo at 21st a home run? Yeah, although it's ironic now that the justification for that is probably, well, he went 21st. Well, you don't apply that everywhere, right? You're not controlling for that everywhere. I don't know if Memphis is GM on it here, but I'd be curious to see what he gave Bane. But anyway, like Rajon Rondo, or even he got a home run for Tatum. Like you can't say that's more impactful than Wade yet. So
it's not even close. It's no, you can 100% say it's not as impactful as Wade. Wade was the best player on a championship team, and it was not like it was like he was Shaq was on that team, and everybody knew that year like Wade was way better, way more valuable. And he like if you look at his numbers in that run, like it's a historic, right? It's a historic type of playoff run he has. And he was, look, Dwayne Wade probably wins an MVP at some point in his career if LeBron James isn't alive at the same time. And I take the point that obviously, like, look, MVPs are hard to win. You kind of have
the Andy
to be
Roddick of the NBA.
It could be, but like I take the point. Like, yeah, well, that's kind of why winning an MVP is hard. Blah blah. Fine, but like he's come a lot fucking closer than Jason fucking Tatum has so far in his career. So like, yeah, you can't. No, like drafting Dwayne Wade is, that's a franchise altering pick. And yeah, sure, Jason Tatum can alter your franchise, but he's not in the same fucking conversation right now as Dwayne Wade. Like, absolutely not. Give me a break.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, I'm not even just saying this as a Knicks fan, but yeah, like not all strikeouts are the same either, right? Like if you drafting Anthony Bennett, I'm sure was a strikeout. Or I don't know if he had was it Kobe Altman at the time? It wasn't.
No. That was David Griffin. Pretty sure
that was Griffin. That's right. So I'm sure
Or
he has.
no, it was, I think it was Chris Grant or something. But Griffin is like, he said on the record before that he was like on board with the pick. So I like to just give that to Griffin just because fuck him.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like he, um, so for Presti, like quickly counts as a strikeout for Presti because they traded that pick to us. Um, I like, but is it really quickly or was it just the 25th pick? That's another thing. And some of the strikeouts are just like really late picks. Like for Presti, he has a million second round picks. So like him picking Jeremiah Robinson Earl at 32nd in 2021 is considered a strikeout. But that's not like okay. That like technically Trevor. This is like putting a towel on and complaining about how the Trevor Keel situation didn't work out. Fine, it's a strikeout, but not all. And like I think this is the biggest problem with this exercise is the idea behind this would probably in baseball it makes sense, right? It's like as long as like total bases matter, right? As long as you keep getting guys on base, you keep getting hits, and you like obviously the more bases you get, the more hits that matter. That's all that matters in the long run, right? Because you play 162 games, you have more of these normally distributed outcomes. But in terms of player eval, the most important things for a GM, I don't think this is super controversial, is not compromising your flexibility, which means that not all strikeouts are the same. Some strikeouts that actually tie you up or have severe long-term ramifications are more than a strikeout. That is losing the game, right? That is like giving up 2 grand slams in a row because you didn't put in the right relief pitcher or whatever. And then the same thing goes to the home run, right? Like you can hit a home run. Bradley Beal at third should be a home run, but tying yourself to him as your start isn't the same thing as tying yourself. I mean, you have Dwayne Wade rated the same. So, I think that's why, like, fundamentally, this exercise in this way doesn't work because it doesn't account for the fact that the NBA is what's often called a fat tail distribution, right? The worst outcomes are significantly much worse than kind of just bad outcomes, more so than you'd think of like more of a normal distribution, and vice versa on the other end, right? The best outcomes are that much more impactful than just good outcomes. And I think that's what this one fundamentally misses. So what Rose deserves is like for the strikeouts they've had, nothing has been, let's not even say catastrophic, but severely limiting. Nothing has actually limited them much. And Jalen Brunson's a triple somehow. They've made a lot of singles and positive moves that, I don't, also I didn't even realize we got Mohamed Gouye.
Yeah, I don't even know. I ignored that because I was like, I have no idea what that is.
I mean, I don't even think I've heard Prez talk about this person. So,
There's
well,
no
he
way
plays
that
for the Hawks now, so I don't know. Did we trade him or what? But apparently that's a single, even though he hasn't played a game in the NBA.
and definitely not for the Knicks.
Yeah, I think that's just a mistake. He was selected by the Hornets and traded to the Celtics and then the Hawks. But also, I don't think the Rose trade was a single, but that's fine. But it's just what you could, if you just look at this list, you can see none of their strikeouts were catastrophic. Here's actually the funniest thing.
Well, even the Jericho Sims one, that's not a trade. Like they traded to get the pick,
yeah,
but they got that pick at the trade deadline. It wasn't at the draft. He was the 58th pick, which they got from Philly because they traded them Austin Rivers.
This also funny that Nerlens Noel is rated as a strikeout for being traded away, as well as a strikeout in free agency. It's like, so which one is it, right? I get it that if he's a salary dump, then that's. But like, which is it though, right? You shouldn't have signed him. You also shouldn't have.
Is it Uchi Wally or is it one Mike? Yeah, no, I mean, look, I just think one, I would suggest that it probably isn't worth it to do for a GM within his first 3 years based on this kind of like just looking at it. I feel like the sample is not big enough and there's too much variability and whatever. But like, yeah, to me, it's just all over the place, this one. And I get it. Like you're doing probably 25 different teams he ended up doing. It's probably hard to keep track of everything. I mean, shit, we know. And some of these things are like, it's hard to know how you should put like what is the technical criteria for something? You know what I mean? Um, like, oh well, quickly could technically that's a trade, right? Or is it a draft or whatever the fuck it is? I get all that, but yeah, I mean, like these results end up just being so wonky, and like I just gotta say, like, I mean, I don't. I guess I just what I struggle with is like I'm not actually sure what this is trying to capture because if you want to tell me Masai has some amazing legacy as a great GM, sure, fine, whatever. But you cannot tell me that based on current performance, he's the second best GM in the league. It's absolutely not. And that is I think the hardest part of this exercise. The way he's drawn it up is like okay, getting right. So signing Fred VanVleet as an unrestricted free agent and retaining him for multiple contracts and getting all the value you did for him as a player. Yeah, those are all great moves. That's a great sequence of moves by Masai Ujiri, right? Okay, but letting him walk in free agency is a catastrophe for nothing. For nothing. Like you just let it, and that's not part of this equation anywhere. It's
Yeah,
nowhere,
and
right?
it's another good point. Sam Presti gets a home run for drafting Durant, obviously. But shouldn't it like you give credit to them for signing free agents? You lost Durant for nothing. That should be sorry. Like
Yeah, and I will like always defend. Like to me, I like shitting on Presti as much as anybody, but like you can't criticize him for not trading Durant because it's like when you have a player of that caliber, like you're just gonna keep them.
sure, and
And
same with the Cavs and LeBron, right? So,
yeah, like I'll never criticize those teams for that, especially because neither of those players. I mean, more than that, right? Neither of those players explicitly said, "Get me out of here." Right? We can sit here and be like, "Well, the signs were."
Mister, get me out of here.
You're right. But it's like we could say like, "Oh, well, the signs were all there." Okay, but in that moment, nobody knew for sure. And when you have a player that good, especially in those markets, like you're gonna roll the dice because you don't know when
Yeah.
you're gonna get that type of talent again.
But
But
if you're also going to criticize, let's say, a super agent who becomes
right,
GM or president, and you're going to say you need to hire basketball guys, well, one reason why you might hire an agent is he might be able to better at closing the deal. He might be better at closing than a guy like Sam Presti who has all the analytical knowledge, but maybe can't get in a room with KD and Ari Gold his way to keeping him there, even if KD's has good options. Like that should maybe it shouldn't like destroy him, but I think that should be a strikeout. If making a bad pick at 32 is a strikeout, then not being able to close your franchise player after you went to the Western Conference Finals should be too.
yeah, no, and I agree with you. I'm just saying, like, I think they should be counted in the resume, and they should be counted as some type of fuck up, whatever the fuck, however you want to, levy that. But like, I would just me personally, like, while that'll count against you in the ledger, I'm always going to be like, okay, I get it, it's fine. But yeah, like, I mean, even Riley, right? You can say like LeBron left. LeBron left. That should count against him to some degree, even though he did. I mean, it's bigger to have landed LeBron in the first place than to never have
It is
signed him at
better to
all.
have LeBron and lost than never to have LeBron at all.
Yes, I was trying to find the way to put that, so thank you. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just weird to me, like that we're ignoring, and it also the one thing, and I think I'm a lot bigger on this than you are, but like you can't grade every GM the same because at various points in your franchise's kind of like arc, different things are going to be are more important. Different things need to be prioritized. There's more or less pressure to get things right at different times. Like I count, I'll put it this way. I think Presti should get hammered a lot more than he does for like
There aren't a lot of good
even
bars in Oklahoma City, so that's
but like even after they lose Harden, after the Harden trade, I always felt like he never did a particularly good job of putting the right type of surrounding talent around KD and Russ, right? Like they never had good shooting, right? They always doubled down on like athletes and size and all this type of stuff. And those can be good educated bets, but like he didn't get it done. And because he didn't get it done, you have to imagine part of that is the reason why Durant left, right? It was like, well, we're not getting over the top. That has to count against you. That has to count against you when you don't get it done in automatic contention windows. Like personally, I think it's ridiculous that Leon Rose is ranked beneath fucking the big failure in Brooklyn. Why can't I think of his name right now? Jesus. Sean Marks.
You can't find your mark.
Yeah, Sean Marks. Like Sean Marks, he gets a triple for Jared Allen. You traded him in the Harden trade, and that was a fucking disaster. They count the Harden trade for him is 2 times a strikeout. Kevin Durant, they give that signing a home run. I can't give that signing a home run because you traded him, which you want to give the trade a home run for like what you ended up getting him. I'm fine with that. But you can't get a home run for signing him when you achieved fuck all with that team. Absolutely nothing. Kyrie Irving, triple. No. Kyrie Irving, like, literally was like a fucking sleeper cell, destroying the organization from within from the moment he signed there. Like, how is that? That's a triple? Like, okay, I'm gonna start calling like Joakim Noah triple. Great signing by Phil Jackson. And then you get like, Joe Harris is a double. They just salary dumped the guy, and he was awful for them in the playoffs the entire time. So what value? Like, to me, it feels like there's like the criteria for different teams and different executives is not the same. Like, and some of these things are calling strikeouts, right? Like, oh, it's Jeremy Lin signing in 2016 was a strikeout. All right, like, let's relax, let's calm down. Like, I don't think that fundamentally destroyed them or something like that. I don't know. Apparently,
I think it's a creative and fun article. I don't want to like shit on the author too much. We're all
we
going to
even said his name. We've been good about that. But Nick Claxton was a double, by the way. Nick Claxton double. Apparently, Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly don't have that the same gas.
I think they should all be doubles, but Claxton's a good pick.
He's a good player, but he can't be a level above.
I think Mitch should be a double too, by the way. And I think that the mistakes are, I think, shoehorning like this kind of very boxed, if you will, range of outcomes for something that is more nuanced. And the author admitted that at the beginning. And the other thing is, like, I think that
and he also does it in the beginning, openly say like, "I would like to hear your feedback." So it does seem like he's trying to like work through.
And there's the snark and like, so like it can be, it's always good to, but I do think the framework is fundamentally flawed. And I think the other part of it is, I just think with especially a lot of, I don't think it weighs opportunity cost well enough at all, right? Like Jalen Brunson this is why like Charles Barkley, and I'm quoting Charles Barkley, so maybe I'm in the wrong here, but Charles Barkley said like Jalen Brunson might be the greatest free agent signing of all time. A little bit of hyperbole, but the point was that you got him for the impact he's having usually cost, a max, right? To get that for almost half really of what a lot of other players are getting paid to do that. Like that has to be a home run. By the same token, the Nets sacrificing all of their leverage to sign KD and Kyrie. And I'm not even going to go as far as you as saying like those were strikeouts, maybe, because they did contribute when they're on the court. But like that should factor in that, that the opportunity cost has to factor in. That's the same way that picking someone who doesn't work out at the 32nd pick, when like most picks at that pick don't work out, shouldn't necessarily be a strikeout. Or picking someone at 25th who maybe is Grimes that much better than a single, like on like in the whole grand scheme of things, maybe not. But you're also not. But he was picked 25th. So I think those are kind of where the article fills. But it's an interesting framework. It'd be interesting to look at advanced stats or other ways to kind of grade GM performance. I haven't seen people do quantitative rigorous analysis, so I'll definitely give the author credit for effort. And I actually mean that sincerely. I think they took this seriously. I just think there were some fundamental flaws there.
Yeah, any list, I agree. I think he tried very hard. I mean, it's like actually a very lengthy thing. It's not it's not just a list. It goes through everything. It's very long. But yeah, I mean, I look. Kobe Altman being 8th is really funny to me. I don't know. I think calling the Donovan Mitchell trade a home run Funny for a variety of reasons that I personally enjoy. It's also no, he didn't call the Donovan Mitchell trade a home run for Utah. I don't think. So I was gonna say
It was a home run for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can claim.
I mean, there are win-win trades, but a
Yeah.
home run and a home run for both seems a little bit,
Yeah, I'm just want to make sure. I don't think he called. No, he didn't call the Donovan Mitchell trade a home run, which is surprising. I don't know. Did he like forget about it or something? Because I don't even think he ranked it. Which I don't know. I mean, I feel like it should be ranked. It was called a walk, a base on balls, which I mean they got fucking Laurie Markkinen in that trade. It was all NBA, and yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, it's a fun list. I mean, it's an interesting exercise. I do think it's like cool to look at. And I was more excited about it as I initially started reading the article, and then I was like, I don't like where this is headed. Not sure that I agree with this ranking. So anyway, what the hell do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we went into that article in depth. Actually, we can talk about this. The Strickland released a dollar ranking of the Knicks dark times, and I think I saw your roster. I forget exactly who was on it. Curious to your thoughts on that and how you decided amongst. For those who haven't seen it, it's like one of those $5, $4, $3, $2, $1. Build your best lineup things. It's a fun exercise. Some interesting players on there. Shwin, curious to how you kind of came up with your list.
Well, so like we only had one. We had one $7 guy that was Mello. I was not going to pick a $7 guy. I just think it's really, really hard to make any roster that makes sense around him.
Would you pick Hakeem Olajuwon for $7?
Maybe. But then I have Porzingis at the 5. This is kind of like cheating too because KOQ Kyle O'Quinn is listed as a 4, but he was totally a 5. So like I kind of got but whatever. Porzingis was listed as a 5, but he's really a 4 with the Knicks. Whatever. I got both of them, and then I have Marcus Morris Mook as my 3. I got him for $5. Which was worth it.
If I told you can't trade him for Emmanuel quickly, would he still be worth $5?
No, he would not. I think that honestly, it helps him so much that he got traded at the perfect time.
He got traded 47% from 3.
Yeah, he's traded for he's shooting 90% from 3. He got traded right when everybody was like, are we for real? Like, yeah, we're not gonna fucking trade this guy in this season that is basically out of nowhere. And it was perfect, right? Steve Mills gets fired, and then Scott Perry trades him for a first and a couple seconds, and obviously the Knicks ends up being a great trade for the Knicks. But yeah, he was really good in New York. Like he was awesome here. But he shot what did you say? It's like 40. It was something crazy when he was shooting
47%.
Yeah, and that was with. And this was not a COVID year. This is not like nobody's in the stands. This was as it was happening. I was just like,
and it was with Randall farting around. So Morris was really the only reliable player. And he was legitimately reliable. I mean, he's a bit of a black hole, but he was very efficient that year. And he also started his career as a Knick in preseason by boinking the ball on Justin Anderson's head in one of my favorite gifts to use. So nothing wrong with
that. That was really satisfying. I think all the young guys at that time anyway, they talked about he was he's a really good pro. I think he works hard, comes in the gym early. I think Mike Miller even referenced him as he really sets a good example with how he prepares and how he takes care of himself and all that type of stuff. So anyway, he was really good in New York, to a level. I mean, he hit the game winner against the Mavericks at the Garden in Porzingis' first game back, which was awesome.
Yeah,
he just had a lot. Yeah, he just had a lot of really, for a guy that played probably 50 games to Nick, very memorable 50 games. He had a crazy game in what was it? I think in against the Clippers. I think he had 40 something, and it was just nuts.
Yeah, that's why they traded for him.
Yeah, it was just like it was ridiculous.
It
what
was
he
the last
doing.
game he played where he played well when the Clippers were on the court.
So yeah, I went with him, and then I picked Galloway at point, and then I had to pick a shooting guard, so I had $1, so I picked Shved. But like, I would have liked. Thing is, like, this is the hard part of this is like we had so many bad players. Like,
Well,
you're
it's like a
picking.
lot of teams. If you think about it, like this is like a 6-7 year period. Most teams, if you take this 6-7 year period, they would assemble like a fucking stacked team, and like ours, I don't even think yours makes the play in. Maybe it does. Maybe it makes the play in, but yeah, it's pretty brutal. I mean, Frank is $3.
Yeah, it would be pretty hard to get like. Okay, so I can reveal this now on the podcast. The reason we made Frank $3 instead of $1 is because everybody would have picked Frank, and so we were like, well, let's just make Frank $3 so that it's hard. Like even if you want him on the team, you actually have to like take the money from another position, right? Like if you anybody that's $1, you're not actually taking money out from your total pot. If you think about it, like that's the minimum. It's a cap hold, right? That's what it is. It's a fucking cap hold. The empty roster charge that they give you when you like don't have enough guys in the offseason. But yeah, like we were like, all right, we had him at 1, and then we were like, now just put him at 3 because that'll make it hard. I did think like I think Galloway was good. Like I thought he was actually good with the Knicks. Not a huge.
I liked him. He also, I don't think that was a fluky thing either. He was solid in Detroit and New Orleans, I think too, right? So
yeah, I feel like he didn't. I'm almost surprised he never ended up on a more like playoff type team at some point, just because he always had that kind of like that game, right? Where it's like, all right, I'll defend, I can shoot credibly, even if I'm not amazing. Not going to make stupid plays. Can kind of toggle between both guard spots. It's kind of weird he didn't like latch on somewhere for longer than he has, but I think ended up doing well. I believe he plays for Team USA when they have to do the qualifying stuff. I think he's like the Steph Curry of that team. So good for him. He's found a little.
Yeah, I mean, he had a pretty solid career. Had a few good years in Detroit, and
he got real contracts. Like he actually made some good money for himself in the league. So yeah, I always liked Galloway. He was fun for me, and that's ultimately like kind of what I think is where I was trying to find the balance is like. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about basketball and all this type of shit, and like how do these guys play together? And I do think I ended up picking up a roster that actually has pretty fucking solid spacing between God mode, Marcus Morris, Porzingis, and Galloway. But like, I just feel like all these guys were fun during their time in New York. Galloway, I liked. Shved, obviously, we have the epic all time whatever the fuck he was trying to do on that play in Detroit. Throws it like 25 feet over the back.
Yeah, but he was not Jared Jack, otherwise they could have had one of those contests for.
Yeah, but he was the Jack one is insane.
You know what it reminds me of? Do you remember that like Michael Vick Gatorade commercial where like he throws the ball and it goes like over 120 yards, way into the bleachers? That was like the real thing with Jared Jack.
It's just like I have no idea what happened to his depth perception in that moment.
Bro was definitely. I don't if it came out that at halftime of that game he was he had a flask handy or he was taking some shots of the Henny, I wouldn't have blamed him. You're 34 years old. You're Jared Jack. You're on a team that isn't doing much. Like, have fun.
Yeah. But like, yeah. So
Jared Jack Daniels.
Yeah. I just think like, look, Shved played like, what did he play like? I got to look this up because he must have played something like 25 games or something as a Knick. First of all, the Knicks actually got him in a good trade. Yeah. They traded Prigioni. Yeah, it was a single. It was a good trade. They traded Prigioni, who wanted to leave. They got.
By the way, also $4 for Pablo. I guess it's the same thing with the Frank thing and the point guard sucked, but that was so much. But sorry, go finish the trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pablo. All right. So this was probably the one where I would have. This is just me. I would have made Rose the $4 guy because people forget we had Rose twice. But the first time, everybody hated Rose. We had him the first time. Everybody did. Um, but I think he was pretty easily the second best full-time starting point guard level dude in that time period, right? Like it's not Prigioni to me in comparison to those guys. It's not Frank. It's not Galloway. It's not fucking Jack. He was better than those guys. So I would have stuck him there, but I get let's not sully his memory by having to remember his first time in New York where he went fucking AWOL and oh man, all kinds of just all the
And
great
honestly,
chemistry.
like he cost us a pretty solid center in Robin Lopez, and then we replaced him with Noah. Like I like I think that's kind of an underrated loss, right? People talk about the Noah signing bad, but Robin Lopez played really well in New York, and you can see he's one of these guys who, he flashed a little bit of a post game in New York, but even without that, he's just a guy who's.
Well, he ended up posting up a lot more in like Washington when he ended up there and on other teams. But
I just remember his crazy hook shot that I think the Knicks were the first team that started doing it, where like Phil Jackson emphasized him in the post. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he just had his like very goofy hook shot that.
and it was funny because he was a righty, but he liked to take that hook shot with his left.
Yeah.
But it was actually like I remember at first I was like, this is so stupid, and then I was like, he's actually kind of good at this. Like I don't know, like have we discovered a new offensive centerpiece? But yeah, like Rolo was really fun, and that trade sucked. I mean, I actually liked the trade because I thought it was a good swing at upside. Like Robin Lopez is never going to give you the ceiling that. What if Derrick Rose, 2 years removed from ACL, whatever, like if he can be Derrick Rose again? I like that part of it. Rose is also an expiring contract. So, like, you could get out of it after the year if you wanted to, which they did. They did not bring him back. But the part they fucked up is they immediately sunk, and they actually freed up money in the deal, too, because they sent out Calderon. And they
They
sent
got by
out,
like Justin Holiday, right?
yeah, we got Justin Holiday back in the trade, which was like a nice little addition. But we did have to give up Jerry and Grant, which, man, what a killer. Maybe we should have had Jerry and Grant on this list. But yeah, like I like the logic of all that stuff, but then it's like, okay, yeah, now we're gonna throw 4 years at Courtney Lee and 4 years at Joakim Noah. Like, not a great use of the
I
cap
never
space.
hated the Lee contract, but the Noah contract was a killer. So
Yeah, the league contract was okay. It just when you don't have needle movers, it's like that kind of player. Just like, well, what is the point of this guy in this team, really? But yeah, like I think Rose should have been on here, but in lieu of that,
and another thing about the Lopez signing is if you look at KP's rebounding, he averaged nearly 10 rebounds a game his first year, and he was monster on the offensive glass. Part of it is his role evolved, where he was used more as a he was a higher usage player, so naturally some of those poop block opportunities and some of the rebounding stuff goes away. He was also asked to do a lot again, especially after Lopez left. He was tasked with doing a lot more things on defense, and combine that with the fact that given his frame and some of those things, and every young player who's athletic has a tendency to block chase. I don't even think he's that egregious in that, but we've seen that with Mitch too. Like those things, but I think Lopez really helped stabilize that. And if you look at his career, he's always been a very positive impact on team rebounding. So.
Yeah, Lopez has been always a extremely effective team rebounder. Yeah, so look, that's kind of why I ended up with the team I had, though, because I just think all these guys are fun in New York. I mean, Galloway was cool, and Shved obviously had his moments. Mook, we already went over. KOQ was great. Like, I mean, not great, but he was one.
He's a solid player on a time when the Knicks didn't have money.
Yeah, and they got him on a great contract. It was like 4 years, 16 million. I believe.
And he was only 25, and he had some untapped upside. Which
and they didn't give up shit to get him. They gave up a second round pick swap. It was like a joke. Like I remember there were Magic fans that were like, "Why are we doing this? He's a restricted free agent. Like we actually don't. We can just match this contract or give it to him ourselves." But whatever. Yeah, we got him for a second round pick swap. He was really solid. He was a good passer, and he's like, I mean, is he the last good passing big man the Knicks have had? I think
Julius
so.
Randle. Oh, Hartenstein.
Oh yeah, Hartenstein. Yeah, Hartenstein's the next one. But like, I mean,
Hartenstein is, I think, to me, that is the guy I've always compared him to. Actually, is O'Quinn. I think he's a little bit bigger and a better. He's bigger, so that gives him advantages as a rim protector. But
yeah, he can
the
hold up.
offensive game is very similar.
Yeah, he can hold up better against centers than KOQ could because he was a little bit smaller. But yeah, like I think he was just really solid. He ended up like, I mean, he got better in his time in New York too, which was cool. Like we hadn't had guys get better here, right? So it was like cool to see a player come. He was a hometown kid, right? He's from Queens. Yes, he was a hometown kid, so it was cool for him to be back home, and he handled that well, unlike certain people who ended up eating Vaseline. But like, yeah, it was just fun, and he had the thing with McBuckets. They had a nice connection, which was always like a fun little 2-man game with those two. And he just, I don't know, he was like an easy dude to root for. And then Kristaps obviously did not end well, but like, I mean, we'll see what he ends up being this year for Boston. But what he was last year in Washington is like the finalized version of what we thought and hoped he could be, right? In time. Like he's actually playing center now, and his rebounding has improved significantly. And now he's become not just a guy who has nights where he goes off from three, but is like a sniper now. He's a 40% guy. And he's got a little bit of a post game, so you can't just like switch, and he's stronger, so you can't just have Marcus Smart, try to take his legs out from under him. Yeah, and he's just become everything he was. But like we got to see those glimpses, and they were fun as hell. Like, I mean, I think it's easy to forget because of how shitty it ended in New York. Like how much fun some of those seasons, at least the start of those seasons, were. Like the 2015.
And it's also like the Knicks got clowned for that pick so incessantly by ESPN, right? Like Stephen A. publicly admitted, like Stephen A. had like he channeled Malcolm X for this rant. 2 months later, he's
literally,
like,
no, like, and like also like quite literally verbatim stole a line from Malcolm X,
which was like, and like it was just like it was literally just because he was European and skinny. Like Stephen A. would 2 months later be like, I didn't really know his game like that. I was just told he was a project. Which, like, why are you here then? But I think that was kind of a big fuck you that, like, even as a rookie when he wasn't any kind of star, but he was, like he had that bucket against Charlotte, right, that got waved off. He had those putback dunks, right? At a time when the Knicks fans really needed hope. I look at it as like how I view currently, like how I think a lot of Knicks fans would view the relationship with KP is that you've seen Rounders, right?
I have seen Rounders.
Leave it to me to make a poker reference after Vegas, but he is like at the end of the movie when Mike McDermott has like this bad breakup, and he like kind of like is like on okay terms with his girlfriend or his ex-girlfriend. Like he's leaving for Vegas, she's doing the law school thing, and they're like, okay, like we're good. Like I think that's kind of where I'm at, even though look, I think there's plenty of blame on both sides, but KP has been pretty we talked about this, like he has kind of regretted. I think he got some bad advice that happens to players, but he seems to have matured beyond it. Can I say I'm going to root for him in Boston? No, but that has less to do with him than the Boston part. And yeah, to your point, it's kind of gratifying to see that the things that maybe it happened a little bit later than you would have hoped, but injury stunted that. I do think like besides Melo, he's clearly the best player on this list, right? Especially since this is 2019, 2020 Julius Randle, I think, right? So clearly the best player on this list, right?
Yeah. Well, I think Melo, right? Or are you talking about my list?
I said besides Melo. No. On our list, besides Melo, KP's clearly the best player, especially if we're just going with 2019, 2020 Julius Randle, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there will be some people that would throw Mitch in there, like his advanced stats from literally the day he walked into the NBA. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, his win shares are really good. No, like his impact stats from the moment he came to the NBA were fucking awesome. But his first 2 years, there were just too many games where you're like, why are you jumping 15 feet in the air and fouling this guy? Like,
Yeah, and that's the thing with rate stats. His impact were rate stats, which were very legitimate. But again, to your point, that's the cost, right? There's like some players play less because they don't get the opportunity. He played less because he played himself off the floor.
yeah, and like, look, there are other dudes here too. Obviously, like, look, J.R. Smith. I would have loved to pick J.R. I just couldn't fit. There was not a point or a shooting guard, or sorry, a small forward that was budget enough to pick $5 J.R. Smith. Also, like, just really sad that J.R. Smith is a $5 guy. Like, I know he was really good for us in the 2012-13 season. Was
But you're
obviously
not trying to get the pipe.
not trying to get the pipe. 6 man of the year, deservedly, and he was awesome down the stretch of that season. Like, people really forget because of how disastrous his playoffs turned out. But he was even in the
first few games
yeah.
of the playoffs until that fucking Jason Terry thing.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was great, and he like, again, the end of that season. I remember watching it. I'm like, did he figure it out? Did J.R. Smith finally like, oh yeah, if I just drive a lot, I can get to the free throw line. But yeah, JR would probably be somewhat close to KP. I think Tyson would be the closest, even though I hate his guts. And honestly, the thing is, we're saying like from 2013-14 to 2020. Was Tyson actually better than KP was in New York in that last season he was in New York? I don't think so.
He checked out. Yeah.
Yeah, he was checked out. And so, like, J.R. Smith, kind of same deal where it's like, man, we're not talking about 6 man of the year version of J.R. Smith, though, right? We're talking about the year after and then the start of the following season. We're like,
talking about this guy. Oh, sorry, that was supposed to be LeBron after.
But yeah, it's I don't know. I couldn't go JR there. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think KP is pretty substantially the second best guy on this list. And I think, look, you can make an argument that in terms of his impact in that moment, he was better at times than Carmelo was in their time together in New York. Especially during that 2015. I mean, the 2016-17 season, Melo was pretty checked out at that point. And KP was obviously like not, although I guess he maybe was towards the end of the year, whatever. But like, I thought KP, like, I mean, people, again, he had that sequence against Phoenix, which I still think is such a crazy play where he, like, I forgot who he blocks there. It might have been Josh Jackson, blocks him on one end.
And then he runs down the court and dunks on him. That was and he also, like, he got into it with Marquise Chris. I think that was something also he took to heart, right? Like, when he came to New York, he got into it with Kent Bazemore. Like, people thought he was going to be.
Oh my God, the Bazemore thing was so ridiculous.
Yeah, there was Bazemore, then there was Marquise Chris threw him down, and he I think he really took it on himself. Like, I think it helped that he was so familiar with kind of NBA culture, more so than maybe guys like Bargnani or whatever who weren't. That he understood, like, these are going to be the narratives around me, right? And I have to, maybe went a little bit too far into that, but it was that was also what I remember. From that
yeah,
Phoenix
I'm not just a soft European. You can't tell me that I have to come to an exit interview. Fuck you.
That's where you go too far, right? So.
But yeah, like, I think people really forget how fun. I mean, the 2017-18 season, so they trade Carmelo that summer. They had signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to that offer sheet. The start of that season was really fun. And I think that season
I remember going to the Garden. He dropped like 37, 11, and 5 blocks on the Lakers.
Was that the Lakers game?
Yeah. And I think, and Randall had a good game too, but like, it was fun watching that.
Frank had Randall and Hell in that game, though.
Yeah, I think this was also the year. Like, I remember the second Frank had Randall. His second year, he got bodied by Jokic when Jokic dropped 41 on him. And yes, I'm sure all of us have comments and posting and toasting saying, "Here's why KP still has the higher ceiling long term."
Pretty sure I have some on Twitter.
Yeah. But the next year, I went to a Nuggets game. And he went toe to toe with Jokic.
Yeah, that was a great game.
He got the better of Jokic in that game, and the Knicks won. Is MSG. So
Jamal Murray went absolutely bonkers in the second half of that game.
I remember that, yeah. And it was still before he was peak Murray. This was a very young age. So I absolutely agree. Until, like, I think it became the kind of situation where defenses adjusted, and the Knicks using it as a focal point clearly didn't work.
Well, and he also, like, look, it was his third year in the league at that point. Like, he did not have the overall offensive skill set to even like to handle that over the course of an 82 game season. His body wasn't prepared for it either, right? Like we routinely saw him in his time in New York, his 3 seasons in New York. He would fall off the last 2-3 months of the season. And honestly, by like
He
January, a
also
lot
had
of times,
anemia, right? At some point, I know he
yeah,
got over a
he
lot of
did,
that, but
he did have anemia. I don't know if that's a thing that maybe
doesn't one
he
of them have
does have
sickle cell or
anemia.
something? Sorry,
Yeah,
forget.
I don't know if that means he always has it, but I know he for sure did have it at that time. Um, and like, so that was always there. And to your point, you're right. Like teams caught up to what we were doing, and look, the lack of not having a penetrating point guard who could get into the paint and create, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is your number 2 option. It's like there's only so far you can go. But there was a stretch at the start of that season. Like I remember they played the Pacers, and they played was it the was it the Hornets? Was Dwight Howard on the Hornets at one point? Am I
Yeah,
imagining that? Yeah, he was, right?
yeah.
No, he was on the Hornets. And like, I think we played them in back-to-back games. We had made these comebacks in both games. And it was like, you had like Frank and KP closing. And I was like, oh my God, this is the future. Phil Jackson actually did it.
No,
He
that
saved us.
Indiana game was where I was a true believer. You remember that game? They came back from, I
Yeah,
think they were
it
like
was amazing.
17 down, and
Yeah.
it
It
was
was amazing.
really it was Frank running a pick and roll, KP popping but like not getting much separation. Frank like do something, and then KP hitting it. It's like, oh my God, he's a pure point guard passer. He's setting up. But I think KP had probably
Look
well
at the
over
way
30
he just
points that
hits him
game.
in his shooting pocket.
Yeah, exactly right from like 4 feet away. But
After not
that.
looking at the, just like not interested at all driving inside.
There was also the Cleveland game with Enes, the artist formerly known as Enes Kanter, fighting LeBron or getting in LeBron's face because he was mean to Frank.
Yeah, that was such a stupid LeBron thing. That like it was like a whole day. Do you remember he was like on the subway and he's like shooting stuff on Instagram and he's like, I'm the king of New York, and you're like, what? Why are you trying to like like? I'm like, dude, Phil Jackson is gone. Like you don't have to do this like thing where you're pretending that this is a rivalry, because this is not a rivalry. We are not good. We are not going to make the playoffs. Like, give it a rest. No, but
that was the
yeah.
game. And then I remember that game, KP played really well for 3 quarters, and then LeBron reminded everyone that, oh yeah, if I actually care on defense, which I do like 10% of the time, in the 4th quarter, he locked up KP.
Yeah. He locked him up in the 4th quarter. Wade was annoyingly good in the 4th quarter too. And I think Corver ended up hitting like 5 threes or something. It was really, really
There's
annoying.
There's always a random Cav player who goes off against the Knicks from 3, except in the playoffs.
Right. But yeah, I mean, and I think people forget, like, look, Carmelo's last season in New York was honestly was a joke. Like he was fucking awful that year. His defense completely fell off a cliff. I think him and Rose very obviously did not get along at that time. They were not complimentary. Felt like there was always a weird thing. I mean, I think he liked Porzingis. I don't think there was anything.
No, I think they were friendly.
Yeah, they were fine. But I don't think he liked the kind of like, oh, this guy's taking a little bit of the limelight now, huh? People are ready for the new thing. And obviously we know by the end of that season, like he's pissed at the crowd because we're like, lose this game to the Wizards. Fucking stop making shots, asshole.
Do you think that was a thing with Jeremy Lin too? Because that's what was rumored, but like it didn't really like a lot of that just seemed like, I don't know. It's tough to tell a lot of times what the narrative of Melo is versus who he is.
I think he wanted to be. Look, he came to New York to be the guy. We know that. Like that was 100% part of the reason he wanted to be here. The limelight, be in a big market, get all that shit. Do I think he was like super thrilled that all of a sudden Jeremy Lin was like the hero of the moment? Probably not. But I also reject, like, to me, that probably has a lot to do with how Mike D'Antoni was like kind of trying to make that work, where he was like, yeah, no, that like, so we have a point guard now. So now you stand in the corner. Like, what are you talking about? I stand in the corner. Like, no, that's it. We don't need you to do anything. Jeremy's got us. We're going to go win the fucking championship with Jeremy.
Secretariat.
Yeah. But, yeah, no, I kind of think a lot of that stuff is probably overblown, but I do think it's not so much that there's any personal issue, and I doubt he even expressed much to KP in that sense. But like, there was that report that he he told KP to like not say that he liked the triangle because of the whole shit with like Melo and Phil. I remember there was a huge report about that. But I don't think I just feel like that season he just decided. I don't know why. I really don't. And maybe some of it was physical, but it certainly felt like some of it was just he was done. And look, Phil didn't help the cause, but even before Phil had totally poisoned that well, I remember the start of that season watching some of those games, and I'm like, still want to like try. And what I was gonna say is the reason it was so frustrating is the year before that 2015-16 season, like I thought that was I mean, Melo gets hurt. We play Boston. I think that game made us we beat Boston at home. I think that game made us 20-20. And he's playing great. It felt like he had a knee debridement surgery or something in that offseason, and it felt like in that month or whatever that he was really starting to get his legs back under him. And not just was he like shooting better and all that type of stuff, but his defense was like legitimately pretty solid that year. And his all-around game was awesome. Like he had it was the best version of Carmelo, I personally think, or at least the most complete version, I should say, of Carmelo in New York. And then so we're playing this game against Boston. Garden's going crazy. He hits a three. He's literally backpedaling. And for some fucking reason, the asshole ref is like standing there and he hurt his knee. He re-injured his knee. And, the Knicks basically, their season completely tanks from there on. And Melo ends up having to like cut his season short and all this type of shit. But like, that season, it's people forget this, but like they were 22-22 actually at one point. I think the game that made us 22-22 was like this game against Utah, or maybe it was Philly, whatever it was, but it was like a pretty epic victory. One of those matinee games at the Garden. And it was like a really fun thing. And it was like a fun team because you're like, okay, so we have Melo, we have drafted rookie KP, he's here. Galloway was still on the roster, right? Lance Thomas out of nowhere. You're like, wait, he's like shooting well this year. What's happening?
Did he shoot like 42% from three?
Yeah.
With that
Aaron Aflalo hadn't become
soccer throw-in form.
Yeah, Aflalo hadn't become like completely annoying yet at that point in the season.
He had that 40-point game against was it Orlando or something?
Yeah, he had balled out one of those. And it was just like the team was. It kind of felt like, obviously KOQ and Rolo was there, and I'm like, damn, did Phil did he like thread the needle? Like, are we? Is this what threading the needle is? But then that season it just goes to shit down the stretch, and it's like it's really frustrating. But I think people forget like the first half of that season was actually really fucking fun, and they had a lot of fun wins, and like it looked like they were going somewhere. And then by by March, Fisher's fired. We got Kurt Rambis on the sideline talking about he wants to run KP at the 3 and all this type of stuff. But that was like the first half of that season is, I don't want to say it doesn't compare obviously to the last. Look, the young talent.
I was just gonna say, we're like, oh my god, we were 22-22 at one point. By the way, Knicks fans at home who are just completely dissatisfied and think Leon Rose needs to be fired, think about that when we're complaining about 47-35. When this is the best me and Shwin can muster up. We were 22-22 one season, like it's it's definitely so.
We were halfway there. But yeah, I mean, it was fun, and look, the young talent that we had then is not comparable to what we have now. Not forget the young talent, just the talent overall. The young talent. If you want to say KP is better than the young guys we have now, sure. If you want to say Melo is better than Brunson or Randall right now, sure. But the overall collection of talent does not match up at all. And ultimately that kind of did them in as soon as Melo couldn't play at the level he was anymore. But and also needs to be said, KP totally ran into like a fucking huge rookie year wall that year. But he did have some really awesome moments. He had a game against like Houston. I think he had like 24, 12, and 7 blocks or something. And it was the first game they ran him at center for a bunch of the game. And you were just like, holy shit. Like, is this real? Like, what's the line in Uncut Gems? It's like, why would you show me if you're not going to let me have it? And that's
fitting
what it was.
because that is actually a guy who that is probably the guy I compared KP to the most, honestly.
Garnett, yeah, I
Is
mean,
Garnett.
doesn't have the same, obviously, like fire and all that type of shit, but there are a lot of
In terms
similarities
of
in terms of,
I probably
yeah,
overstated his mobility, but it's certainly Celtics KG, right? He was not like obviously out of high school. KG was just a complete freak, which KP wasn't that athletic, but that was always kind of my compliment.
I do wish we had just done more like scheduled rest days with KP because it feels like he would wear down right over the course of a season, and then he'd always have these stupid nagging injuries towards the end that would leave him out for the last whatever, like 10, 15 games. And I felt like you could see him getting exhausted as the season went on. And I'm like, man, maybe we should. And you didn't think about the ACL and all that. I mean, the ACL thing was a complete. I don't think that had anything to do with fatigue. He just landed really
Thanks,
weird.
Giannis.
Yeah, right. He just landed really weird, and that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, look, the time that he was here was actually kind of fun at times, and I think people forget that because obviously they still did a lot of fucking losing, but he did make an All-Star team in New York, which that was like pretty cool to have one other guy do it other than Melo, and it felt like by that point it felt like every time Melo made it, you were just like, you're just making it now because like we are so desperate to have some like little sliver of national attention on this like all-star stage. But yeah, I mean, KP it was a fun thing. And to your point, like it just shows you that, I mean, look, what we have been through as a fan base is pretty fucking rough this century. But it should, if it doesn't, I don't know, tell you, but like it should make you appreciate what we have going for us right now. And like, look, I don't think they've nailed everything in the world, but you can't.
Yeah,
I think
and I
there's
think this. Sorry, go ahead.
no. I was just gonna say, like, I feel like I just see there's too much sentiment of like, well, they could have drafted this guy and this dude, and maybe we could have had this guy, and it's like I get all that, but at some point, teams that are good and want to be good and want to compete now and be as close as they can be to contention, guys that you draft, they're not going to be playing much anyway. They're not. And so it's a tough thing to manage all of that. And I'm not saying they've nailed everything. And look at what I'd like to see them when we did our like the 5 biggest mistakes of the Leon Rose thing. I said not moving into the 2023 draft I thought was a mistake, and I stand by that. But like, I also think people like it's worth understanding that okay, yeah, you didn't move into the 2020 draft. What did you get for trading away that pick? Oh, you got Josh Hart, who is good, who's going to be part of this team for a while, and who complements everybody on the team. And really, if there's one thing that Leon took advantage of that I don't think any of these other guys did, Mills, Phil, Derek Fisher, who was
Perry.
before?
Oh,
Yeah,
before Phil.
Perry,
It was Grunfeld, right?
Grunfeld,
Grunwald.
whatever.
Grunwald.
Yeah, Grunwald. But like, so especially those guys though, Phil, Mills, and Perry, and then obviously then we get Leon. But like,
It was Grunfeld. Sorry.
yeah, but like Phil and Mills both had opportunities with a fairly clean slate early in their tenures, and they did not do well with it. And simultaneously, they didn't seem to have a great plan or an understanding of like, or a point really, good coaches, good infrastructure, like get good infrastructure in place, good support staff, any of that shit. They
Phil is
didn't do
really
it.
interesting there too because I think he nailed the KP pick like in a draft where it could have gone sideways. Like I do wonder if Hinkie was rumored to want to take KP. If he does that, maybe it looks different if Phil Jackson takes Okafor. But I think like the draft was fine. Like I think the Frank pick is obviously in hindsight not as great, but he wanted him for his system. But I think it was really I think to your point, he like the people that he found were not particularly well suited. Or sorry, like he tended to. I think he was loyal to people like Rambis. Um,
I mean, he made Rambis the highest paid assistant in the league.
Yeah, he was loyal to. I mean, it's also another what if, right? Like he had 2 sniper shooters who were coaching candidates the same year. One was Derek Fisher. The other one went on to win 4 rings. So, it's just, what happens if Steve Kerr comes here? But I definitely agree with that on Rose. I think it's also just kind of a product. It's a reminder that like we just mentioned, like that we did have some fun times, right? Looking back, it was a lot of depression and stuff, but like, just like a lot of bad times.
No, it was depressing to be a fan. If you were depressed in your life, hopefully the Knicks were not the cause of that.
Yeah, that's a good way to rephrase that. But if but like we could enjoy 22 and 22 this year. Anything less than like that's what we were talking about this before. If we don't make past the second round, it's gonna be tough to swallow because it's the same thing. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because like you have to remember, like some of the most miserable fan bases are like the Patriots or like Alabama, or if you like go back to when the Spurs were really at their peak, read like Pounding the Rock after a loss, and you just talk like people are like fire Popovich and shit, and I think about this both from the Knicks perspective and from the perspective of Michigan football. When I was there, they made one bowl game. They won 3 games, 5 games, and I think 5 games again. When I was there in a 3-year stretch, they've been awful. But like this year now, it's like anything less than a championship seems to be like it would be a disappointing outcome. And I think as a fan, you have to guard against that. I'm not saying the Knicks are at that point, but they are at a point where there are expectations. And that's kind of the curse of expectations, where once you get good, you cannot enjoy some of the things that we talked about enjoying. Real quick, I'll actually just say mine. So I did have KP. I think that's probably not a surprise from how we were talking about it. I think that I don't know how big you are on this bandwagon. I was always on the bandwagon before Randall came here. Obviously, when the Knicks had KP that summer, I wanted them to keep KP, and like leaving aside the Durant stuff, I thought that KP and Randall was always a very intriguing combo. And I think people probably still think that, and I think that would have been interesting if the Knicks had traded for him. And so I have KP and Randall. I went with Galloway for a lot of the same reasons. The downside is Galloway isn't ideally an initiator.
Yeah.
And I'd probably be relying on Randall for that, which both of us have talked about, the danger
Beyblade.
of that. But he would have good spacing. I'm banking on the fact that with what would be a 5-out lineup, Randall should be able to eat. And KP, and by the same token, KP being able to play off Randall could make Randall's reads a little bit more simple. And then I filled out the roster with Dotson, just at $2, get me a 3-and-D guy who can do his job. Probably not going to swing too many games, but knock down open shots, which will probably get a lot, from the attention that Randall and KP are going to draw. And then I had to take a small forward. So my version of Shwed was Lance Thomas, but for all the hate that we gave Lance Thomas for looking goofy and not being a particularly good shooter, he was a guy that did the little things. And on this roster,
other than a rebound,
what
bum.
Yeah. He was in the right place. I think he could play around these guys. So I like that team. KP, Randall, Galloway, Dotson, and Lance.
Yeah, I mean, I think the KP Randall thing is always very, very enticing. But yeah, I mean, look, it's like fun to look back at this, in a kind of like self, fucking just, you really want to just be a masochist.
It's like looking at your phases when you're like 18 or 19 and the kind of music you listen to or people you dated or whatever.
Yeah, it's fun to look back at, but I'm also like very, very thankful for where we are now. And I think like honestly, stuff like this should make people really get some perspective of like how far the team has come in terms of talent, how far it's come in terms of how it's run. Look, say whatever you want about Tibbs. Tibbs is a way better coach than any of these guys.
We should have. Oh, so the two. Yeah, Tibbs definitely was. The one thing is you left off a guy who made the game-winning block on LeBron and stared him down, and dunked on Giannis and stared him down. I would have absolutely taken Hazonia at for $1. And then the other thing is it would be cool. That's the other one is it would be cool with coaches too. If you had to pick,
I mean, I think
they would all be $1, I guess.
It's pretty easily Miller, right?
Oh, if you're counting Miller, if of the bad ones, I probably would go Hornacek, but
it's definitely Fizdale.
Yeah, take that for data.
I think Fizdale's like easily the worst coach we've ever had. It's like it is so.
Already Del Negro.
He's fucking awful. That guy was 4 and whatever it was 20 or 21. Fucking with Marcus Morris shooting like Steph Curry from three. Fuck him. That guy was awful. One of the worst coaches in anything, in any sport.
But I
Maybe
do got to
one of-
ask about Hazonia. I got to ask about Hazonia. Why wasn't my guy on there?
I mean, he wasn't actually good in New York.
he blocked LeBron to win the game and pointed like he for memes alone. I mean, it was better than
It was a
Lance,
good
I think,
meme.
right?
Was he? I don't know. He only played what? Hazonia was only here for a year or two. Like, Lance was here for felt like way too long. Lance was here for way too long, but he was at least here for 4 years, I think. Like, which is
He had a whole ass
God.
presidential term.
That's just really depressing to think about. We picked him up in the middle of that dog shit tanking 2014-15 season.
Hanging around.
Yeah, he's just hanging around. Yeah, this is look. It's fun, but let's be thankful for what we get to watch now instead of what we had to watch then. I think that's a good place to end it. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you. Plug anything you would like to plug.
Stacy Fadden 89 on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And I'll plug this. Check out this tweet and let us know what your team is, and let us know when we drop this whose team you think would win.
I have nothing to plug, so I'm not going to plug anything. Just plug the wonderful work at the Strickland. Check it all out. It is all going very well. Look out for a new podcast that will be dropping soon, maybe even this week, that we have in the works. And yeah, that is it. All right. Thank you for everything. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Bet Online, which is again your number one source for all your betting needs. That is our show for today. Hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you on Friday.